Do I need to remind you what is out there?
Once upon a time, I had somebody that I cared about. And in this world, that sort of shit's good for one thing. Getting you killed.
The original ideas for the game really came out of, we watched this Planet Earth special where David Attenborough talks about a cordyceps fungus, and the cordyceps fungus infects this ant, takes its bodily functions and takes it up to a leaf stem, and cordyceps grow out of it, and spores explode and it hits the colony. And David Attenborough succinctly says something about, the more numerous a species grows, the more susceptible they are to being hit by this cordyceps fungus. And that was our jumping off point. Like, what if this cordyceps could infect humans?
What do we do?
You make every shot count. You see, I believe everything happens for a reason. We don't have to do this. You know that, right?
After all we've been through. Everything that I've done. It can't be for nothing.
It really became clear from the very first pitch that they gave that they were trying to tell something completely different and completely intimate. The sound effects and music and the technology that made it all happen in The Last of Us is not a reactive process. We were very much in it from the very beginning and sculpting out what it was going to sound like.
We knew that it was going to be challenging to create sound for a world that had no technology, no electricity for the most part. Also, we wanted to create environments that were natural but underscored the mood of the game.
We were really playing with this idea of kind of in that Hitchcockian way. Like, it's more about the psychology of what's happening on the audioscape more than what you're seeing. It's like, again, less is more. It's not about the dialogue and exposition inside of a scene. It's sometimes the look in a character's eye. And that's the same thing with the audio. It's just kind of saying, like, okay, well, less is more. Strip all that away. Then when a sound hits, it's really impactful. Like, there's something meaningful there.
Bingo.
Ellie, come on. Go.
We really felt that this story was darker, was deeper, more emotional than other games have been, and especially other Naughty Dog games have been. And how do we purvey that in the sound of the game?
The story takes the characters to a lot of very diverse locations. We have old, burned-out cities where the vegetation has reclaimed the environment. We have suburbs, snow blizzards, forests. While there are still cities and urban areas, they're all pretty much vacated. The infected have either killed everybody or driven everybody underground, so to speak.
Can't be any worse than in here. Can it?
Oh, God damn it! Fuck.
We're shitty people, Joel. It's been that way for a long time.
No, we are survivors.
This is our chance.
It is over, Tess!
I think it's a sound guy's fantasy to be able to work with the palette that we're providing with this world, because it's so much of the experience is sold through audio.
And the other thing we would tell them is, don't be afraid to make it subtle.
Yeah.
The sound doesn't, even though it's brutal, it doesn't need to be big. Like, you can underplay a lot of these ideas.
One of the most exciting parts of this project was the fact that we were starting from a blank slate. We really looked at how we wanted to create these sounds and have them come from a very naturalistic point of view. We really were thinking about minimalism and how it could be brought across in a game. And so we had a really high dynamic range that we decided to play with in this game, which is very different. And I think it gave us really opportunities on how to inform the player where their tactical information and where they could really explore and kind of feel a part of the world.
We're doing basically a pretty complex environmental model, and we're using a reasonable chunk of the power of the cell to be able to do it. For example, our obstruction system. I'm really proud of that because it's something that we created in-house. We're using a method that I call stochastic obstruction, which is basically stochastic meaning random. So we literally throw out every game frame on the order of anywhere between 1,500 to 2,500 raycasts. Most games wouldn't throw out that many raycasts per frame for the whole game, for the AI, let alone just for audio. But the power of the cell is so great, and our raycast optimizations are so good that we can afford to do that.
I could just take her to the North Tunnel and wait for me there.
Jesus Christ.
It's just cargo, Joel.
Dialogue in this game is very, very important. And we used performance capture actually to a much heavier extent than we have in the past. We did a lot of mocap with the principal actors for both cinematics and in-game audio. And we kept almost 99% of all that. We used the same microphones and the same setup that we did on the stage in the ADR studio as well to capture all of those off-the-cuff moments.
One challenge with games is that you have very limited memory. One of the things we try to do is to let sounds play out as long as possible. And in this game, it was even more important because you had to, when Joel takes his hand off a door, you have to hear the dust fall. You have to hear the building settle, things like that. Because the world's broken, essentially, and abandoned, we spent a lot of time recording doors, rusty gates, rusty metal. Neil, you could tell, our sound designer, took a trip to Rio and found lots of places to record old buildings, old doors and gates and things like that, mailboxes, but he also recorded chickens. So we took those recordings of the chickens and sped them up, and those are actually the voices for the rats that you find throughout the game.
One of the biggest challenges we had were the infected. The first infected, we knew that there were going to be stages, but we weren't sure what they were going to be. And the first stage we decided to work on, which we knew was probably going to be the toughest, was the clicker. And we came up with the idea that they were going to be blind through the artwork that ended up happening, and that they were going to use echolocation. We kind of came up with this idea, and we worked with these actors and just said, hey, kind of come up with something, and we worked with male and female actors. And there was an actor by the name of Misty Lee who made this one sound when Derrick and I were in the stage with her. And we were like, whoa, 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 that's it, keep doing that. And it was just this thing in the back of the throat, which, I don't know, unfortunately or fortunately for the players, I'm sorry, that I was able to emulate. And I kind of became the sound of the male clicker. And it was just this really kind of tight, like, this kind of like sound that was back there.
Here's this benign clicking sound that on its own isn't very creepy, but put in this other context, all of a sudden you hear this sound and it has this different symbolism in the game, and it becomes this fear factor. And again, using audio, you don't know where this is, and you hear this clicking sound, it's echoing down the hallway, and people get very scared when they hear this audio cue.
One thing we came up with right away was that what we consider action music in The Last of Us isn't really stereotypical action music. It's still relatively low-key. If you take it out of context and listen to it, you wouldn't think, oh, that's a huge action scene or that's a big fight. And the thing we really latched onto was the fact that The Last of Us had this really sophisticated AI programming for the enemies. So their state, whether or not they're searching for you or actively attacking you, or just completely oblivious to the fact that you're there at all. We wanted all those things to affect the music.
Bruce and Neil, when they were doing early development in T1, they were concerned about how they could get this game to feel spooky. And one of the things that feels really spooky in The Last of Us is when you've become familiar with the soundscape and you know what the sounds of the threats are. You've seen the clickers, you know what they sound like, so your lizard brain is ready for fight or flight. And then you hear one through a doorway. your brain just immediately reads that as, oh my God, if I go through that door, I'm probably going to be in trouble. And that's exactly the sort of really spooky setup that we want to be able to get the player to feel. And it takes a lot of tech to be able to do that and pull it off and make it actually sound right and work. And we're really proud of what we've done. I really think we succeeded.
Clickers?
Shit, go.
I mean, we could add just a little bit, very subtle, but downfall sometimes at the end of the phrase in the flute.
The thing we liked about Gustavo's music is how sparse it is and how much he's able to achieve with very little, which basically fit with what we're trying to do with The Last of Us very well. And the first thing we heard was what became the Last of Us theme, which he did for the trailer. And Bruce and I remember we got that file and we're supposed to give him feedback, and we're listening to it and we're just like, this is awesome. This is better than anything we could have imagined. We're kind of blown away of like how already the first piece, he just hit it out of the park.
Up until the last few moments, we're constantly adding more and more sound. There's constantly changes coming. There's constant things that we want to try. At the very end, Phil Kovats was mixing the game. And it was that moment when I saw things coming together as an audience member.
It's hard not to just be proud of all the talent and all of the attention to detail and hard work that was put together. Putting one of these games together is not easy, and it takes a lot of time. And any game person will tell you this, game owning person, we come at the end, we get pushed on, and it's hard. But when it all comes together and know you're working on something special, there's something just magical about that. And these guys and girls just did such a great job.
The great thing about Naughty Dog as a team is that nothing's sacred, and everybody just wants the game to be as awesome as possible. So just being the music guy, I could walk down the hall and talk to a level designer, and actually the fruits of that conversation might result in them changing the way the level played a little bit because it just made more sense. And there wasn't a sense at all ever that we couldn't sort of get things we needed in order to just make the product better.
The way we play with sound in general is that idea of negative space, that idea of subtracting and getting down to the most like simplistic, what's the most minimal that you need to pull off what you're trying to achieve. And I think we saw that at the beginning of this game, and we stuck to that all the way through. And I think the sound guys, they jumped on board and they owned it. And I think that's something, it adds tension, it adds loss, it adds hope, it adds so much more dimension in the moment that without it, it's just kind of, oh, it's another kind of action game, but has so much more emotion tied to it.
We actually made it.
It's called luck. And it's gonna run out.